let's move on to the AFC East offseason overview. We're going to start with the team who won the division, went all the way to the conference championship game, the Buffalo Bills. They did lose that game to the Chiefs, but it was a massive jump for them last year on the back of the man we just talked about, Josh Allen. First off, the losses. They lost wide receiver John Brown, tackle Ty Netsky. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Nasecki. Okay, there we go. I mean, I need to know that because he's now backup for the Cowboys. Tight end Tyler Kroft, edge Trent Murphy, and defensive lineman Quentin Jefferson. And then on the additions, like you said earlier, they added wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, a veteran. That's a solid addition. Tackle Bobby Hart, running back Matt Breida from the 49ers. Tight end Jacob.
He went from
from the Dolphins. And then the Niners previously is when he was last notable, I guess. And then they picked these guys up in the draft. Edge rushers Gregory Rousseau out of Miami, a guy who was really hyped up about a year ago, but through the COVID season started to lose some steam. And then Carlos Basham in the second round as well. Aaron, you're a big Bills believer. I know you love Josh Allen, so I'm going to turn it over to you first. How do you feel about the Buffalo Bills offseason?
Yeah, I think so. I really like what they did. I mean, like you mentioned, not really losing many people, and really address some needs. I mean, got another good wide receiver, Emmanuel Sanders. I know he's later in his career, but they may need him if one of their main guys go down. Matt Breida addressing the running back room, but also giving Zach Moss maybe another year because I know I was high on him last year going into the year. And I was very underwhelmed by the year he had, and same thing with Devin Singletary. But yeah, I mean, taking Jacob Hollister, who was a solid tight end in Seattle. I know Dawson Knox is probably going to be their main guy, but they like to do different things with that. And then, but yeah, in regards to the main thing is, we saw in the AFC Championship, couldn't really get pressure on Mahomes. That was an issue throughout the whole season. Was their front four wasn't that impressive. But just judging off preseason games, I know it's preseason, but. Gregory Rousseau did surprise me. He's looked pretty well in preseason. I mean, he is a huge human being. I think that's also what they need, just general size. I remember one reason I wasn't high on him at all going to the draft was he didn't test well. He had sat out a year and just wasn't as impressive as a guy like Jalen Phillips, who literally played in the same system on the same team. So, he's kind of proving people wrong, at least in the preseason. So hopefully. For the Bills, he can make more of an impact. And Carlos Basham's a name I've heard too. That has potential as well. So kudos to the Bills for just straight addressing the needs. And also, I didn't put this on there, but keeping Matt Milano, who is probably their best linebacker. As much as I love Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano's been better all around. So hopefully, hopefully Doug McDermott learned from last year. Because remember, he gave the defensive reins completely over to Todd Frazier for the first, half the season, and their defense was not good. And then I think if I remember correctly, he stepped in. Defense kind of it didn't get amazing, but it was better. It's like we say with the Seattle, as long as it's average, you're fine. So I'd be curious if they can get back to the elite level that they were 2 years ago defensively. Because if they can, then they'll definitely. Regardless, they'll still be in the Super Bowl conversation. As long as they have Josh Allen at quarterback. But it will be tough. We're going down this division. This is a very good division. This year, last year Miami came on late and New England kind of fell off late. So we'll get into them in a second. But yeah, I still expect this team to be in the playoffs. If I had to bet, I'd bet as them to win the division again. So you got a lot to look for. Buffalo, and like we mentioned earlier, Josh Allen last year was not an aberration. He is for real, and he is, like I said, in my eyes, I think he can very much still stay in this top three conversation for quarterbacks. So that's how I feel. John, are you a believer in my guy Josh Allen and his Bills?
I am, but I wasn't super ecstatic with the offseason. It just didn't feel like they necessarily made any major moves. I like the Emmanuel Sanders edition, but I was hoping maybe they would address wide receiver potentially in the draft because I feel like they're a Stephon Diggs injury away from having a pretty terrible wide receiver group. Obviously, to my knowledge, I don't think he's really struggled with injuries throughout his career at all. So it's not like we have anything to go off of. But when you're that reliant, I think, on that one receiver being the guy, and most teams obviously have their true number one receiver, but we've seen a few other teams like the Saints, for example. Right now, Michael Thomas is hurt. There's disputes on if he even wants to be there. And so all of a sudden it's like, okay, where do we go with wide receiver? And all these young guys are having to sort of step up and fill this role to where other teams, like the Steelers, for example, if Juju Smith-Schuster gets hurt, they still have Deontay Johnson, they have Chase Claypool, they have depth behind him, right? And so I was maybe not like a top draft pick on wide receiver, but I was hoping maybe second, third round, fourth round, even that they would try to get a wide receiver in there. I don't know if they did because I don't know their full draft.
They didn't, but I think, just sorry, quick rebuttal. I think that's where they believe Gabriel Davis, who was a rookie last year and had some moments, I think that's where they think he can step up and, be better or be their number two.
Yeah, and I mean I hear it. It's just like I said, I don't know. I just feel like wide receiver is just such a deep position, especially in the draft, that it never hurts to take one right in like the third round and just take a flyer on a guy who might become a long-term starter. Because Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley, they're both older veterans, so maybe you start to prepare a little bit for the future. Running back is also still just a question mark. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't have addressed it that much. I think Matt Breida signing was nice, just add depth, but you got to hope that Devin Singletary or Zach Moss really pop. Maybe the combo of them can finally like put together a solid rushing season. Because last year it wasn't good enough. It just felt like their run game was pretty weak. I mean, Josh Allen, he contributed to the run game, but those running backs, it never felt like they were really a threat to the other team. So that's the offense overall. I mean, I think when you have Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, a pretty decent offensive line, and still solid weapons, I think they'll be fine. Defensively, I liked how they went out and addressed the defensive line. I'm hoping that, at least for their sake, Ed Oliver has more of a breakout year this year. He hasn't been terrible, but for what he was billed during the draft, I just feel like I expect more out of him. I expect him to start elevating himself into one of the top defensive tackles in the league because he was a top 10 pick. And, there's a reason that, when you're a defensive tackle, you go that high. It's because you're supposed to be that kind of a guy. So I'm hoping that he can do better. And I think that if he can, along with Star Lutulele, Vernon Butler, like they have depth on the defensive line. Jerry Hughes is still there. Mario Addison's still there and now you add in Gregory Russo and Carlos Basham. I think that they have a really solid rotation. But I think we need better out of those two defensive tackles because that's going to be the anchor of your defensive line. Those guys can help stop the run. That's going to help your linebackers do a lot more. And then they have a really solid secondary. And so I just think that if their front seven can sort of dictate the game more, then their secondary won't have to be relied on as much or have more chances to be exposed because they have to cover for so long or try to cheat up in the run game because the front seven can't necessarily handle what the other team is throwing at them. So yeah, overall, I mean, I think I like the areas they did address, but to me, it just didn't really feel like there was any sort of big flashy additions, no like huge signings that really tipped the scale in their favor when it comes to the playoffs. But like you said, with Gabriel Davis and some of these other guys, maybe that just comes from internal development and growth. Anything else on the Bills?
No, I mean, I can feel free to move forward to the next team here.
Yep. All right. So next we got the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, the big story for Miami is Tua Tagovailoa in year 2. But the big changes for Miami, and there's a lot. On the losses side, they lost Kyle Van Noy, Shaq Lawson, Bobby McCain, quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, which that does signal that this is Tua's year because obviously Fitzpatrick did start 6 games last year. Matt Breida, who we just talked about, went to the Bills, and center Ted Karras. And then on additions, they brought in quarterback Jacoby Brissett, which I think is an interesting move because obviously he started plenty of games. And so, maybe that's just an insurance thing because Tua has had injuries, but maybe it could mean more if Tua does struggle. And also that's quarterback that head coach now Brian Flores is familiar with during his time in New England. They also added linebacker Bernardic McKinney. They traded with the Houston Texans to acquire him. Added linebacker Shaquem Griffin. A couple of cornerbacks in Justin Coleman and Jason McCourty, who once again Brian Flores has familiarity with from his time in New England. Running back Malcolm Brown. That's an interesting spot because the running back, I think, is one of the more interesting position battles they have going on right now. Wide receiver Will Fuller, which I was a massive fan of because I think that he's just a game-breaking type of wide receiver. Center Matt Skura, tackle Greg Little. And then the draft, they had one of the better drafts, I think, in the whole league. In the first round, they had 2 draft picks, got wide receiver Jalen Waddle, absolute monster from Alabama, edge rusher Jalen Phillips, who we just talked about, a beast at Miami, outperformed Gregory Rousseau in the same system, although it was separate years. And then safety Javon Holland out of Oregon, a guy who many people thought could potentially even go, first round, but he was a second round pick. And then tackle Liam Eichenberg, another second round pick. And so for me, I was pretty high on the Dolphins offseason. I liked a lot of the additions they made. They were a team that was on the brink of going to the playoffs last year. And I think because of some tiebreakers, that's why they missed it. And like the additions they had, they just added a lot of players that are really quality guys, right? Like linebacker Bernard McKinney. I think that's a really underrated one. He's been really solid for the Texans throughout his career. Justin Coleman and Jason McCourty. That's some really nice depth for a cornerback room that features Xavier Howard and Byron Jones and first round pick.
Noah, I'm not even gonna
yeah, Noah, whatever his last name is. So, I mean, now you have 5 really good cornerbacks, like those guys being your 4th and 5th corners. That's a luxury right there. But that's the Patriots way. I mean, this is something that Bill Belichick does, and we'll talk about this maybe a little later, but he's really big on investing into a secondary and getting top tier talent. And so I'm not surprised that Brian Flores is doing something similar. I already talked about Will Fuller. I was a big fan of that addition. And even to add on to that, I loved getting him and Jalen Waddle. I felt like both of those guys and the game breaking speed that they have, I think it could just provide a new dynamic to this offense that just really hasn't had that. Mike Gesicki's a monster. Devontae Parker's good. Myles Gaskin, Malcolm Brown, solid running backs, but they didn't really have that guy who can like take the top off the defense with his speed. And now they have 2 of them, 2 of the best deep threats potentially in the NFL, as long as, Will Fuller can come back from a suspension and be all right. And then Jalen Waddle can develop.
First game of the season.
Yeah. So not going to miss too much. And then like I said, I just thought they killed it in the draft. Jalen Phillips, he's a monster. There was some potential injury concerns, but if you're going to take him 18th, you have to be comfortable with, what you've heard about him and moving forward. And the talent was obviously there. I think without the injury concerns, he would have gone even higher. Javon Holland, I was a big fan of him too. With the Cowboys needing a safety, I wanted them to get him. Miami obviously took him before we could even get a shot at him. And that secondary is just so freaking loaded, man. And then Liam Eichenberg, the one thing I do have concerns about with this team is offensive line. And so I like that they addressed it with, a solid second round guy. He's from Notre Dame, I'm pretty sure.
Notre Dame lineman. So he's going to be solid probably because they all have been pretty much.
Yeah, Notre Dame linemen are always good. There's a few schools like them, Wisconsin, who, when they produce offensive linemen, they're good. And so, yeah, with the additions they made, it feels hard for me to keep the Dolphins out of a playoff spot, but in a really competitive AFC. I mean, because you talk about like the AFC North with the Ravens and the Browns and the Steelers, all 3 could potentially be playoff teams. Now this division with multiple potential playoff teams, the Chiefs and the Chargers and the Raiders, potential playoff teams, right? But with the Dolphins additions, I can't see them not improving off of that 10-win season. And so I think they could be legit contenders with the Bills for this division. But I think it all rides on the back of how well Tua can, do in this offense. And I don't think there's really an excuse for him to not be better than he was last year. It felt like he was pretty good at being conservative and safe last year, but I think with the weapons they gave him, I think it's time to really fully unleash him and just see what he can do, and stop relying on your defense to win you games when you just throw for 100 yards. But what do you think about this Dolphins offseason?
Yeah, just to continue what you were saying about Tua. I mean, he did mention, during the offseason, he didn't really have a full grasp of the playbook. And like we've kind of been, like John has basically been saying, we've been saying, this is very New England, light, basically. This is
right.
what Brian Flores is trying to bring a lot of New England concepts, and they have one of the more complicated offenses. And remember, we have to remember they didn't have a preseason last season, and there's all the COVID was definitely going on and all that uncertainty. So and he has looked better this preseason. He's been a little bit more aggressive, and so there is hope. I mean, yeah, we're not saying that when we were criticizing Tua, it's just because a lot of people were saying he was the next big thing. We're like, calm down. He's got flaws. He's got a lot of flaws, and we saw that last year. But obviously, still worthy of the first round pick. They still believe in him. But yeah, regardless, I mean, whether Tua progresses or not, as long as he doesn't regress, this is going to be a competitive team.
Right.
Like we saw at the end of last year. I mean, John just hit it off. I mean, a stacked cornerback room, very similar to New England, and like New England too, they invest. They get a lot. They get good linebacker depth because, like I think we mentioned this in another podcast. Linebacker's a physical position, and those guys tend to get hurt a lot. They're kind of like running back too. It's good to have good depth there, so you can filter them in and out. But yeah, draft pick wise, I mean Jalen Waddle, like we mentioned in the post too. Like I wasn't, I mean I was still high on him, but I wasn't as high on him as John was. But preseason, he's already shown he can be their. He's working the slot, be their Julian Edelman, Wes Welker type guy. But he can also play on the outside. If Will Fuller does get hurt or something. And so that'll be huge for their offense. As much as we both like Jalen Phillips, once again, this is going to be a New England style type team, so don't expect Jalen Phillips to be getting a lot of sacks because New England just believes in getting pressure as opposed to getting sacks, which can be two different things for New England. That's why they're never really high on their sack totals. But yeah, I love what they did with offensive, like addressing some things on offensive line. Traded, I think it was a 6th round draft pick for Greg Little from the Panthers, who I was kind of high on coming out. He hasn't really impressed, but I feel like he hasn't really gotten the chance over in Carolina. So now he does in Miami. And then, yeah, like John mentioned, Liam Eichenberg, another solid tackle. And the line wasn't that bad last year. I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't that bad. So taking the appropriate steps. And I think, and also, I mean, didn't they traded back too, right? To 10. So I think they still have additional picks next year. Regardless, they have picks. Like I think they have another first. They have their first rounder. I think I know for sure. I'm not sure if they got another one from San Francisco. Regardless, I know they have picks. They have like
I think they
additional
traded
second.
back, but didn't they then trade up?
I don't know. Yeah, they did, but I don't remember what they gave. But
They traded up with like Philly, right?
yeah, Philly was at 6, and Philly traded back, and that's when
I
they
can't
got
remember what they
Devontae
gave
at
up.
10. I don't. I remember. I don't believe it was much. So regardless, I mean, because San Francisco, I think they gave like 2 first round picks to move up. So regardless, once again, Miami's gonna have ammo if they
Yep.
need to address the offensive line, or if I'm crossing my fingers, knocking on wood for them. But if Tua, they're not impressed with Tua after another year, another good quarterback on them, in the draft. We have 2 first round picks this year. Next year, let's move up, push the chips in, get him. And roll with that. I mean, because like we just said, this is going to be a very good team, very good roster. I expect this team to definitely be in the playoff conversation and definitely be pushing the Bills in regards to the division. The biggest thing is just the biggest question mark too, if they can win the division, is going to be Tua and the offense. Can they do enough to help the defense out? So.
Right. And by the way, I don't know if you saw these reports. I mean, I think they're total BS, but apparently the Dolphins are still front runners for Deshaun Watson. There's been recent reports that they've made traction on a potential deal.
Yeah.
I don't believe those for a second because a guy who's dealing with 22 sexual assault allegations right now, and the price is reportedly 3 firsts and 2 seconds. No team is going to pay that until something gets figured out. But I do think that the continued rumors about Miami being interested are true. And I think, like you said, they have the ammunition if they do want to move off Tua to go get a guy like Deshaun Watson. And I think it would almost work out in their favor if Tua does have a pretty solid year this year, but maybe not a year where they're so sold that they're not willing to move off him for Deshaun Watson. Then maybe Houston changes their mind a little bit because reportedly they weren't really interested in getting Tua back in the Deshaun Watson deal. But I think just with the state of their team potentially this year, they might be a little more interested now. I don't know if it's because there's a quarterback they're really high on in future draft classes, but yeah, I mean the the ammo they have is pretty absurd when it comes to draft picks, and then also to and just the talent that they can move. So don't forget about them in a potential move for Deshaun Watson, or if Tua doesn't work out this year, like you said, moving up for another quarterback in a different draft.
Yeah, I think just real quick before we end that on the Dolphins. If anything, I think I would believe the reports are true, but we aren't hearing what the Dolphins are offering. And I feel like the Dolphins are just telling Houston, hey, we'll give you one first or two firsts, and that's our price, and just letting you all know in case, because it seems like Houston. I think I read the report, they are gonna, because Deshaun Watson has been put on the commissioner's exempt list, that they are gonna go with him on the 53-man roster, but he's just gonna be inactive every week until this sorts itself out. So I think Miami's just doing that and say, okay, y'all, and if y'all ever get sick of paying him for doing nothing, send him over here. We'll hold on to him until this clears up, and then boom, we got him for a lower price than asked for. But yeah, that's definitely an interesting development that we'll have to see what happens with the Dolphins and the Texans.
Yep. Well, moving on to the next team, the New England Patriots. Obviously, last year did not have the most amazing year post Tom Brady. Went 7-9, but man, they decided to try and bounce back in a big way, and that was through spending money in free agency. But first off, they did lose quite a few key names that we have grown accustomed to when it comes to the Patriots. Starting off in the offensive line, they lost guard Joe Thuney, who obviously went to the Kansas City Chiefs, and that was a pretty big move. But we know the Patriots, they tend to lose a lot of offensive linemen, and they just keep pumping them out, and their offensive line is still fine. So wouldn't be too worried about that. Also lost tackle Marcus Cannon, but I believe they replaced him with tackle Trent Brown, former Patriot who returned. So once again, not concerned. Wide receiver Julian Edelman retired. That would be, a pretty heartbreaking loss. But obviously, with Tom Brady gone, Gronk gone, all the old guard, Julian Edelman was one of the few guys that was still holding out, and he decided to call it. And their wide receiver room, they addressed it pretty heavily. So not the biggest loss. They traded running back Sonny Michel to the Los Angeles Rams after Cam Akers got hurt. I know a lot of people are really high on Michelle, but I don't think Bill Belichick is, because after his rookie year where he did really well and was very key to that Super Bowl run, when Damian Harris came in this past year, he was the guy. He was the one who got all the touches. And I think that losing Sonny Michel for, I think it was a 6th-round draft pick, like that's just a standard Bill Belichick move. The guy, he's getting closer to a contract extension. You move off him for the running back that you're more willing to keep and more willing to give the heavy dose of carries to. They also lost running back Rex Burkhead, one of their typical standard receiving backs, but they have James White. They've had him for so long, so it's not
James
that big
White
of an issue.
Hasn't left or just worn out yet, but I guess it's because of his role. His role allows him not to take that much physical damage.
And I think, maybe he's found his place. He loves it. And then obviously they lost Jason McCourty, who we just talked about, going to the Miami Dolphins. Now, the additions, there is a lot. And like I said, they spent a lot of money in free agency. I think this was potentially the most money the Patriots have ever spent in free agency in their franchise history. Started off, they got edge rusher Matthew Judon, who left from the Baltimore Ravens. They added linebacker Raekwon McMillan, safety Jalen Mills. As we talked about, they added tackle Trent Brown, formerly with them. He came back. They brought in center Ted Karras. Wide receiver, this was a big position of need after last year, so they brought in both Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar. And then the two big swings that I think most people were pretty excited about was bringing in the 2 tight ends, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, the 2 premier talents at tight end on the free agency market. They brought in both, which is giving people flashbacks to Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. And then in the draft, they got their guy. They got quarterback Mac Jones. A lot of people had him going there. It felt like it was the perfect fit. And so far in the preseason, he's looked all that and more. They've also added defensive lineman Christian Barmore, a guy from Alabama. The Bill Belichick, Nick Saban relationship, it always, does well when it comes to draft time. So 2 straight picks were from Alabama. And then notably running back Ramondre Stevenson. As we talked about, Sony Michel is gone. Damian Harris is the guy, but that opens up that sort of backup role of who's going to fill in because the Patriots love to run with a committee at running back, and he has balled out this preseason. I think he is first in running backs when it comes to total rushing yards and yards after contact in the entire preseason so far. So we'll see if the fourth round pick can become a key contributor to the Patriots, as most of the running backs always tend to be. But Aaron, how are you feeling about the Patriots? I know it's a tough division with the Bills, the Dolphins looking really good, and now the monster additions that the Patriots made. But how do you feel about them moving forward and their potential to, make a playoff run?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to definitely be back in the conversation. I mean, last year they were right when they started to figure it out. Cam got COVID, and I think we could all agree that was a lesser talented team. And I think we had mentioned it because there's no preseason, lack of training camp, things like that. It hurt the Patriots a lot because that's a team that is definitely more reliant on their coaching and their schematics week to week, as opposed to some other teams where they're more reliant on talent. Well, now, we had a preseason, had more of a usual training camp, and then, like we just mentioned, they added a lot of guys. I mean, size was an issue on their defensive line and front seven in general. Added Christian Barrymore and Matt Judon. I know Matt Judon not going to be getting double-digit sacks. That's not what they want. They want Matt Judon's going to defend the run, and yeah, he'll do his job, apply pressure. Maybe he'll get 8-9 sacks, but he's versatile, and that's what New England loves. New England loves versatility. Added depth with Ted Karras. He can play not only center but guard and tackle. They value that a lot. Then we mentioned the wide receivers. I think previously they can take handoffs, sweeps. They can also go downfield, run multiple different routes, and especially if they do go with Cam week one, because there's still that uncertainty. But I think that they will, just because it might be too. I don't think they want to hand the keys too early to Mac Jones. But regardless, if Cam's struggling like he did towards the end of last season, I think Mac Jones has shown that he can step in. And it's not going to be the same offense, obviously, where pulling guards and Cam's going to and the quarterback keeps it and runs. But it's still going to be an effective offense where it's going to be like Tom Brady offense again, where going to run the ball, and then also he can drop back and pass and dice you up that way. And then like John mentioned too, because of the two tight ends, they can do that. Both tight ends can also split out in the pass game or play action game or the bootlegs, and then last point, the running back. I mean, let go of Sony Michel, who it seemed like, I think from what I read, he's had a lot of knee issues or just leg issues after that 1 year, so probably why they cut bait. But it's New England. They find other running backs, like John mentioned, Ramondre Stevenson, great preseason. Same with J.J. Taylor. That's probably why they felt comfortable letting Rex Burkhead go also. So, yeah, I expect this New England team to be right in the mix. I expect the defense to be right back in it, because even if Stephon Gilmore doesn't really play, J.C. Jackson deserves to be up there, and as cornerback one, he's shown that, and especially if they do have Stephon Gilmore, then and they've invested throughout the years in other cornerbacks. So I expect this is, like I said, this is a tough division, and I think it's gonna be a very competitive division. I think they'll be in the playoff conversation. I'm not going to say for sure that they'll be in the playoffs, because I am worried about New England. Like everyone has a weakness, and the weakness is maybe not getting the best wide receivers. Yeah, they'll hit on the Edelmans and the Welkers, but there's a reason N'Keal Harry is on the block. And remember, They picked N'Keal Harry over guys like DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, even Mecole Hardman. They miss. So... and Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, I think that was kind of those were upside kind of grabs. So we'll see how it works out for them. But yeah, I expect New England to be right in the mix, and they're right back in it, man. Like this will be a fun season for this team, for this division.
Before I go, first off, do you think Mac Jones will start any games this year, barring injury from Cam Newton? Let's say Cam Newton and Mac Jones both healthy all this year. Do you think he'll start? And if so, at what point do you think they would turn over the reins to him?
I gotta imagine it would be like. So, to answer your first part of your question, I'm gonna go with yes, and it's just because it's not that I don't believe in Cam Newton. Well, I guess I don't really, but It seems like every year Cam fixes his mechanics on the off season, but then as like the weeks go on, he reverts back to some of his bad habits where it's he's using most of his arm, not really using his lower body, and then we see issues with his shoulder and things like that. So yeah, I think Mac Jones will take over, and I haven't looked at their schedule, but I imagine it would be like week 7 or 8 because that's usually when Cam kind of starts faltering off. And we saw last year. I mean, they're granted it may have been just because to keep Cam healthy, but they pulled Cam, put in Jared Stidham at times. So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be shocked if it was sooner, but if I had to bet, it'd be like week 7 or 8. If Cam's struggling, Mac Jones goes in, has a good ending to the game. Next week, we're going with Mac from here on out.
Yeah. So the notable game on their schedule is they do play the Buccaneers. They play Tom Brady, but it is in week 4. And so I think a
Cam's
lot of
undefeated against
people,
Tom, so that's why they got to keep him until.
yeah,
But
I just think a lot of people are under the assumption that Cam basically has those 4 weeks. That is your proving ground because I
yeah,
don't think Bill Belichick or the Patriots want to put Mac Jones out there against the Super Bowl champion Tom Brady because the expectations and the pressure will be so much higher because it's not going to be just Patriots Buccaneers. It's Tom Brady versus the guy who's supposed to be the next Tom Brady,
yeah, who's
Mac
literally like
Jones,
built
right?
like him and like went to New
Yeah.
England too.
And obviously Cam is technically Tom Brady's successor, but like Mac Jones is really labeled as Tom Brady's true successor.
Yeah,
And
he's the
so,
guy that they're drafting and
yep.
wanting to develop.
Yeah. And so I just think they don't want to put him in that situation, especially since, once again, it's the reigning Super Bowl champs. The Buccaneers have a really good defense. It just wouldn't be a smart move for anybody. And Cam, he's a veteran. He's played in the bright lights. And I know that Mac Jones has played in college championship games. But if we're being honest, that would probably be the biggest game of his career to that point, right there. You're playing against Tom Brady, the Super Bowl champions, and just the amount of pressure, it would just be huge to where Cam Newton, he's played in a Super Bowl. This game is just another game to him. It's not a big deal. So to me, yeah, I don't know when Mac Jones starts. I do think he's going to take over at some point in the year, especially if they don't necessarily have the start that they want. But I think it's going to be sometime after that Buccaneers game. After that, they play the Texans, the Cowboys, the Jets, the Chargers, the Panthers, the Browns, the Falcons. So not the toughest string of like defenses there.
Who was
The
before the Jets?
Browns,
I'm sorry.
the Texans, and Cowboys. So I mean, there's a pretty much to finish out their season. Honestly, not a whole lot of tough defenses until you get to like the last 4 or 5 weeks. So I could definitely see Mac Jones getting in there somewhere, like you said, around week 7, maybe 6, 8, in that sort of range. Because so far in the preseason, he's looked honestly like the best rookie quarterback. Like if we're just going to put it plainly, he's looked like the best rookie quarterback. But overall, for their offseason, I'm never a big believer in building through free agency. I think historically, too, the teams who spend the most in free agency don't do the best. But that's also in large part because the teams who are spending the most often are really bad and are spending, a ton of cap space because they don't have it allocated to people they've drafted. So the Patriots are sort of unique in that way because they weren't terrible last year, and all these additions could elevate them into a winning record. But like you, I'm not fully ready to put them as a playoff spot. And I think that once again goes down to the Bills are really good. The Dolphins got better. There's only 3 wild card spots, right? And that's what I think the Patriots are going to be hunting for. I don't think they're going to win the division unless like Josh Allen gets hurt or something. Then that opens the door. But I think it should be the Bills. And if it's not the Bills, I'd pick the Dolphins over the Patriots as of right now, just because of how loaded they are. But yeah, it's just tough to have them a lock as a wild card team because let's say the Dolphins take one of those spots, a toss up between the Browns and the Ravens. Now you got the Patriots, the Chargers, the Raiders, the Steelers. There's just a lot of teams, the Colts vying for that last wild card spot. So I'm not ready to say that they're going to make it yet, but I think they're definitely in the conversation, like you said.
Yeah.
So overall, solid offseason, and I think a lot of people are more excited about Mac Jones than they were. And I don't like Mac Jones that much. I don't like the Patriots that much, but part of me is rooting for him to be successful because both you and I had him mocked to go number 3 overall, and we got so much hate because of what we did there. And obviously, he was the 5th out of the 5 top quarterbacks taken. But like I said, in the preseason so far, he's looked like the best out of
What
all
up, Mitch?
5. But moving on to the final team, another team that has a guy that you are super high on, your boy Zach Wilson and the New York Jets. The Zach Wilson era has officially begun. The notable losses: Sam Darnold. Obviously, they got rid of him. He got traded to the Panthers to make room for Zach Wilson. Running back Frank Gore. Is he still playing or is he retired?
I'm not sure if he's retired. He hasn't signed with the team yet. I think he's still technically a free agent. So
Yeah, I mean the guy he just keeps on chugging, so maybe he'll come back. Notably, Brashad Perryman, one of their better receivers last year. Obviously, not an amazing receiver, but one of the better guys that they had. And then cornerback Brian Poole. But sort of like the rest of this division, they had a lot of additions. First off, safety Lamarcus Joyner. They added edge rusher Carl Lawson, who then got hurt, so they then traded for edge rusher Shaq Lawson. They added defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins, linebacker Jared
who,
Davis,
by the
tackle
way, I
Morgan.
think is also, if I heard, was also hurt for the year. So that one's kind of
Jared Davis.
yeah.
That's tough. 2 of their signings are out for the year. Uh, then they added wide receiver Corey Davis, who solid signing after he finally had the best year of his career last year after being a top 10 draft pick. Never really lived up to it until finally a solid year last year. Should be their top wide receiver, at least going into the season. Wide receiver Keelan Cole, another solid signing. Oh, my camera just cut out.
Oh, you good?
I don't know why it's cutting out. Added running back Tevin Coleman, another solid signing, a depth option. Didn't really have an amazing run game last year. And then the draft where they really struck gold. Another team who, man, they just killed it in the draft. One of the best drafts, in my opinion, in the whole league. Started off with quarterback Zach Wilson. The guy has made some amazing throws this
Headband
preseason.
Gang.
Yeah.
Gang.
Your guy, and I'm sure you're gonna have a lot to say about him. But so far in the preseason, although he hasn't had the Mac Jones sort of playing time, he's had his moments where you see the arm talent on display. Then they added guard slash tackle Elijah Vera Tucker. That was a big move because obviously their offensive line isn't amazing, but they do have the sort of youth movement over the last few years, adding first round picks onto that offensive line. And so they add him there, and that should provide some stability for Zach Wilson. One of my favorite draft picks in the entire draft, wide receiver Elijah Moore. I've heard nothing but good things about him in preseason training camp so far. It just sounds like he's really popping. He did get hurt, and I think he missed the last preseason game. But don't sleep on him. I would not be surprised if at the end of this year he is the most productive Jets wide receiver. And then also added running back Michael Carter, guy that we were both pretty high on, had him in the top 5 for our running backs in the draft. And I haven't heard the best things so far in preseason, but overall,
he's had a rough start.
Yeah, but overall, I mean, I think he's right now 3rd on their depth chart behind Ty Johnson and Tevin Coleman. I have him in fantasy, so I'm pretty invested in how he's going to do. But I think everyone sort of expected this, that they would start off with sort of a committee look and give him chances to try and assert himself. He hasn't really done that in the preseason so far, so maybe we'll see because they'll give him absolutely opportunities. So we'll see if he can do so moving forward. For me, I mean, with the other 3 teams in this division, I think they're going to finish last. But sort of like I talked about with, I think, the Jaguars, it's a building year, right? There's not really expectations for what the Jets can do this year. And I think that's good for them because when you have a lot of rookies coming in, a lot of young guys in the offensive line, a rookie quarterback, rookie running back, rookie receiver, just a new head coach, a lot of fresh faces. I think it's good when you can come in, not really have expectations, but I really liked what they did in the offseason. I really like the foundation they are building. I'm blanking on the left tackle that they selected last year. Mekhi Becton. Having him and Elijah Vera Tucker along that offensive line, I think those 2 guys could be monsters moving forward for a long time. And so I really like the building blocks they have on offense. Zach Wilson, those two on the offensive line, Elijah Moore. Don't forget about Denzel Mims, second round pick last year. I haven't heard, unfortunately, amazing things about him out of camp, but at the same time, it's a crowded wide receiver room that the Jets have because they're just trying to figure out with the talent that they do have. And so I think he'll get his opportunities in the regular season, and we'll see what he can make out of them. And then obviously, like we talked about, running back Michael Carter. So I like the youth that they've brought in, and I think that it's like I said with the Jags, it's the way that you start a rebuild. You get a lot of really high upside guys, and you just see what you can do with them because you don't have expectations to really win. And so, yeah, I like what they did. I also really like the hiring of Robert Saleh. I think that he can have a solid defense over there because they still do have Quentin Williams. They added Sheldon Rankins, so they have solid defensive line. Um, it sucks that Carl Lawson, their big free agency addition, he got hurt. But overall, I think they have some solid pieces on the Jets defense. And then their offensive coordinator, he came over from the Niners with Robert Saleh. He's Matt LaFleur's brother, right?
Yeah, Mike LaFleur. So
Mike
gonna be
LaFleur.
running the same
So
system.
yeah, so I mean, same sort of Shanahan type system that they're going to be running over there, and so should be really friendly to Zach Wilson and the offense they have on that side of the ball. So don't sleep on the Jets. I mean, like I said, I think they're going to be last in this division, but I think they had a really good rebuilding type offseason. What about you?
So yeah, I like what the Jets did on paper. Obviously, it's just unfortunate that injuries have kind of been creeping in for them. Because I think Mekhi Becton's also dealing with an injury already in camp.
Yep.
So they're already getting the injury bug, and I'm surprised Tevin Coleman survived because he's had a lot of injuries. No offense to him, but regardless, like you said, no one's really expecting a lot from the Jets this year. But it is the city of New York, and I think we were seeing in baseball, and we've seen before that the city turns pretty quickly. So if you're to Jet fans, just hang in there this year. This is going to be a rough year. Like I said, you already lost one of your big signings. Like John mentioned, Carl Lawson and Jared Davis. I think they're your two huge signings on defense. So it's going to be a rough year, but hopefully, I do think regardless, I think Zach Wilson will be good. He's looked good in preseason. Like you mentioned, I like the moves. Even if Mackay's not 100% or, Becton has to sit out a while. Morgan Moses, solid right tackle for the Washington football team for a couple of years. I'm not sure if he can play left tackle, but still, he's solid. Elijah Vera Tucker can play tackle. That's why I put that. He did play left tackle at USC a bit in his senior year. Better at guard. But, once again, if Mackay's out, but if Mackay's not even out, then even better, he plays guard. So they have talent, like John mentioned, and they're definitely supporting Zach Wilson better than they did, than the regime that had Sam Darnold did. And granted, too, it helps that I think we can all agree. I think Zach Wilson's a better prospect coming out than
I would agree.
Sam Darnold, definitely. I mean, he's already.
I was not high on Sam Darnold coming
I
out,
wasn't high
so
on Sam Darnold.
I'm a little
Either,
biased.
but I'm just saying, people thought he was the next great thing.
Yeah.
But I think, like I said, I think Zach Wilson's for real. He can make all the throws, and it's not going to be immediate. But I wouldn't be surprised if this team does somehow pull like a Chargers season where it's going to be like 6-11. But in reality, I think it's going to, because of all the injuries they have, I think it's going to be like a 3-14 type season, just because it's. I mean, right off the gate, I pulled out the schedule. Week 1 Panthers, and that's Matt Rule and that team, and they're going to be really want to start off on a high note at Carolina too, and Sam Darnold revenge game. Week 2 Patriots, fun. Then the Broncos at Mile High, so that'll be a first for Zach Wilson.
Always
game.
tough.
And then the Titans, and then you finally get a break with the Falcons, but then you get the Patriots again, and then Bengals,
and even the Falcons. I mean, Matt Ryan, veteran quarterback.
Yeah, and then you get the Bengals, and then you get the Colts. This is a rough one. Colts, Bills, Dolphins, 3 straight weeks. Oof. And then to end the season 2, they had the Bucks and Bills, and they also play the Saints somewhere in between there. So, yeah, it's gonna be a rough year for the Jets, and hopefully, but I think regardless, I think it'll be an encouraging year. And I'm not sure what they are looking cap wise, but maybe they can take a few more swings next season, off season, get a few more guys, and if they can keep hitting the draft picks like they did this year, then they can really be a force next year. But this will be one wild division regardless. But
I think for the Jets too, it's got to be nice that I think in a normal year there'd be like way more expectations on them, but because of Trevor Lawrence and who he is, the Jaguars have way more expectations than the Jets do. And then you think, okay, well, maybe the national media doesn't have big expectations, but the New York one. But then on the other side, they got the Giants, who Daniel Jones, make or break year. The NFC East is wide open. They could win it. And just all the things that are happening on the Giants side of the ball. So even in the New York media, like they don't even have that big of expectations. And so I think it's got to be good for that young team, new head coach, new staff, all that stuff to just come in and I mean, obviously they want to win and they want to do really well, but not have the pressure to perform like right away in what should be a building year, like you said. But overall, that's going to be it from us. That is the AFC East recap and our quarterback rankings. Next week, we are finishing off our division offseason reviews with.
it'll be Friday.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, this Friday, but I think the videos will be coming out next week. The NFC East, Dallas Cowboys, New York Giants, Washington football team, Philadelphia Eagles, my team, my division. And we'll have potentially
Mitchell Matthew on, who's already popped in our chat, said hi. I think he popped back out afterwards, but he'll be on there Friday. We were supposed to do an episode with him last year, and then he took a nap and never woke up.
Never showed up. But hopefully he shows up this year.
This is the season to show up and talk about the team.
They won the division last year. They're not going to do it again. We'll get into that next week, though. Anyway, that's going to be it from us. Hope you enjoy. Make sure to like the video if you do enjoy the content and click the subscribe button on YouTube. I don't know which side of the overlay it's on, but check out our Instagram. We've been posting daily content over there at Shut Up and Ball Pod for I don't know how many months we've been posting daily. Oh, right now we're dropping a lot of fantasy content if you are interested in that kind of stuff. Above me, we got TikTok. Not as active over there, but trying to be a little more active and grow our fan base there. Also have a Twitter, Shut Up and Ball, and then a Facebook at Shut Up and Ball Pod as well. So follow us on social media and hope you have a good one.